thanks for tuning into the Quality Hub, chatting with ISO experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and I'm hoping you're all having a great day. Today, we're going to be speaking with one of our CMMC consultants here at Core, Ty Elliott, about where we are with CMMC. How you doing today, Ty?
I'm doing well, X. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Been a busy day, and I know it's been busy in the CMMC world, so, we're here to talk about that. I know, Ty, you've been helping many of our customers in dealing with CMMC, and you've also aided several in reaching CMMC certification. Could you give us just a little bit of history about yourself, but mainly about your input with CMMC and what you do with that?
Sure. Yeah. So CMMC has been around for a number of years now, starting with the executive order back in 2010 that kicked things off. I first got into CMMC and NIST 100-171 in 2018, when the manufacturer I was working with started to receive requests and strongly worded requirements for information security.
You got to do this.
Yep.
Hey, Ty, do you know anything about the CMMC stuff, right?
So being in quality assurance and in systems administration, all the technical back-end stuff, Active Directories, networking, configuration and setup, I really saw a great link between how you can make a good product and set up rules to make that good product every time. Kind of transfers directly over to information security, where if you've got a good system and it's manageable for people to do and they understand what's going on, you should get a consistent result.
Right. Now, how does that tie into this to CMMC and what we're dealing with today?
Yeah, so CMMC, the objective is to secure our nation's controlled unclassified information, things like defense prints for how to build a fighter jet or a land vehicle, and for protecting federal contracting information, all the details about what the government is buying, where is it going, who's involved. These are all pretty sensitive things that, if our adversaries had a hold of them, would give them a pretty good roadmap into where they could pull sensitive information out of. So these things are not classified, as in they're not secret, but they do need to be controlled.
Gotcha. Well, let's get started with when we're talking about where we are today with CMMC. In a nutshell, can you tell us right about what's live versus what's still evolving?
Yep, this is a great place to start our conversation. We have now entered the first year of the Department of War's 3-phase 4-year process. As of November 10th, 2025, the final rule of Title 48 of the Code of Federal Regulations, or 48 CFR for short, is now in effect, which integrates CMMC 2.0 requirements into the Federal Acquisition Requirements, or FAR.
Okay, so what does that actually mean?
Yeah, so they set up a system of rules for how information security needs to be handled. That became law, and then the next rule came out saying that they could enact those requirements.
Okay, so they can go in the contracts. Okay.
Yes, yep.
Now, you mentioned about how the CMMC requirements are protecting FCI, which is federal contract information you mentioned, and controlled unclassified information, or CUI. What's going on now with those being in contracts across the defense industrial base?
Pretty much any supplier, whether you're a service provider, manufacturer, is going to be subject to these controls and requirements. So right now, there are FAR clauses and CFR clauses in solicitation verbiage that call this out as a requirement.
Okay.
This is now rule and law. It's no longer a future plan. It's a current requirement.
Okay.
But since it's a 3-year phased rollout, our members of the defense supply chain still have time to react and plan.
Okay.
With this phase 1 that started on November 10th, to put it generally, any supplier or service provider in the defense supply chain which handles CUI must create a system security plan and submit a CMMC Level 2 self-assessment attestation to the Supplier Performance Risk System, or SPRS.
And I think System Security Plan is SSP.
Yes,
in
correct.
case you hear those acronyms, which are so popular in the military and defense and government in general.
Right. Yep. System Security Plan, or SSP. Think of that as your quality manual on steroids for your information security system. It's going to lay out exactly in detail where your network connections are, how your CUI comes into the company, who's touching it, and how you're protecting it.
Okay.
So the self-assessment, you go through the controls, you indicate that they're met or not met, and you have a plan for anything that you haven't met. That's the minimum level of compliance that's required.
So is that level 1?
No. Yep. So let's talk about the levels. Level 1 is for securing just that federal contracting information, and it is subject to a smaller amount of controls than level 2.
Isn't it like 11 or 17 or something like that?
Yep. It is 15 controls that are based on a FAR regulation and 2 additional ones.
Okay.
Now, level 2, that's for protecting our prints and all that special stuff.
All the CUI.
All the CUI. Level 2 is all based on NIST 800-171, published by the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Okay.
It's similar to ISO 9001, where it lays out all the requirements. It's basically the standard.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I said, the level 2 self-assessment is the minimum level of compliance right now. For sensitive projects, the contracting officer or program manager at the highest level may elect to include firm requirements for actual CMMC level 2 certification. This would be on a per contract or per solicitation basis.
So that's if you're required to.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. So always becomes important to read through those pages of solicitation verbiage and requirements, highlight those FAR clauses, look them up, see what they actually mean, and what do you need to do to make sure that you can still bid on it.
Okay. So what do our members of the defense industrial base need to do at this point?
Right. Yep. Any company handling CUI will need to build a system security plan, lay out the boundaries of their scope in which the CUI will be handled, and start planning how they're meeting any gaps for things like encryption, physical monitoring of the facility, or personnel training.
Okay.
When we are planning out how we're going to fill those gaps, we're going to use plan of action and milestones, which is analogous to a corrective action or in ISO world.
And they call that POAM sometimes.
Yep, POAM. Yep, so SSP and POAM, we'll be using those terms a lot.
Okay.
So there are 110 controls in NIST 800-171, and to be fully compliant, you have to meet all of those. So the system is based on compliance score. If you have a full 110 score, you've got everything covered. There are no gaps.
Okay.
With a self-assessment, you don't have to have everything 100% done. However, there are major items that you're not allowed to have a plan of action for. Let's say something critical like an incident response plan. What are we going to do if something goes wrong? You have to have that in place before you can make your self-assessment attestation.
So I thought after we hit that November 10th date, we kind of had to do more than just a self-attestation.
Yeah, so some things have changed with the self-assessment and the self-attestation.
Okay.
For instance, these critical controls, the ones that you must have in place to complete the self-assessment, have grown in number, and we're no longer allowed to have a POAM due date, let's say in the year 2099.
Okay.
They have to be realistic, and you have to have a plan to meet them.
Okay.
The next step in phase 2 begins on November 10th, 2026, where solicitations will require CMMC level 2 certification conducted by a third-party assessor organization or a C3PAO.
Not to be confused with C3PO from Star Wars, but you can remember it easy that way, C3PAO. So basically where we're at now is there's some things that you absolutely have to have in place that you can't have a POAM for. But anything you do have a POAM for, you're going to have the full certification by November 10th of 2026, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. The formal certification, you'll go through an assessment with the C3PAO, and it requires a perfect compliance score of 110 at the end of that. It's a little different than ISO, where if there's an issue, we'll do a corrective action and they'll vet that later on. So there's a lot of impetus on the organization to figure out what they need to do now So when November 10th, 2026 comes around, that they're able to go through an assessment and maintain their eligibility for these bids and solicitations.
So it's no longer, we'll just kick it down the road. It's we're doing it.
Yes. Yep. This is very much live and real now.
Yeah. Okay. How prepared is the defense industrial base today with all of this coming around the corner where certifications are going to be hitting hard by the end of the year? And what misconceptions are you hearing about CMMC?
Like I said earlier, the CMMC initiative has been active for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest misconceptions is what I mentioned earlier, that you don't have to have the requirements all met, that as long as you put on a piece of paper that, yep, we're going to do this sometime, you're still compliant. That's just not the case. It was an option, but no longer.
So like I said before, no kicking it down the road. It's here.
Correct. Yep. Another misconception is that the CMMC Level 2 assessment and self-attestation can be treated lightly. It would be best to take the viewpoint that the self-assessment is a legally binding statement, which it most certainly is. Lack of awareness or ignorance is not an excuse if you make false statements. So if you don't understand a control or requirement, don't assume that you have it covered. Seek guidance.
Okay.
The self-assessment is subject to the False Claims Act, and repercussions for inaccuracy could be severe. We saw a number of large whistleblower situations with some major players in the industry last year, and I think that is set the playing field for people to take it seriously.
Yeah, sometimes there may have been a reason they did that, to say, look, this is serious, and you sign your name, it better be accurate. Ignorance is not an excuse, and we're going to hold your feet to the fire if you're not signing anything that isn't true, a false statement. Mm-hmm. So how prepared is the defense industrial base right now? I know we're going to have these certifications and all that kind of stuff. Where do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Well, as far as the defense industrial base, or DIB, their preparation, the CMMC workforce is growing. More companies and organizations are becoming those C3PAOs or assessors, and more assessors are becoming available. As of February 1st, 2026, just a couple of days ago, 770 organizations have achieved CMMC Level 2 certification.
Okay.
And that's out of an estimated 300,000 members of the defense industrial base. So you can see only a tiny slice have been certified so far.
I don't want to do that math. It's because it's really, really low.
So what happens on November 10th, 2026, if a significant portion of the supply chain becomes ineligible?
You took the question right out of my mouth. What does happen?
Well, there are backup plans. CMMC has been a fluid development, and I'm certain there are contingency plans in place for such a scenario. Per the Chief Information Officer of the U.S. Department of War, the department may opt to delay Level 2 certification requirement in a contract to an open option period. While suppliers should not bank on that contingency, we can be comforted in knowing that there is a backup plan and the DIB won't come to a sudden halt.
So while they may do that, is it going to be on a per contract basis?
It will be on a per contract basis.
So don't just think it's going to get, November, they're going to push that back. Well, it might be based on somebody else's contract, but not yours. Mm-hmm. So that's really a good picture of it's time to really move. Mm-hmm. Who do you think is really feeling the most pressure right now? Do you think it's the primes, the subs, small manufacturing? Where do you see a lot of the pressure?
Right. Everybody in the defense industrial base is facing pressure for different reasons. Primes must ensure that their whole supply chain, especially their critical suppliers, have a plan in motion.
Yeah, that's a really good point where I know in some of the webinars we did last year, it's like, it's not just the primes, and they got to roll it down. And if you're not certified, they might not use you. You might be taken off the list, even if you've been there a long time, because they're responsible for having their subs to be certified.
Correct.
Meaning that they have an obligation to know their suppliers are certified. Where before it may have been like with 9001, we use ISO as an example. You're getting certified. Okay, as long as you're certified by a certain amount of time, you're maybe compliant, not certified yet. Cool. No, if you're not certified, they might not use you because they are on the hook as well.
Right. And they're very active about this right now. And for at least the last 6 months, if you're a supplier to one of the big aerospace or defense players, you probably received at least one questionnaire about your status of compliance. That isn't because that you have an actual contractual requirement, but, the primes have to manage all of their supply chain.
Right. So it's a serious thing for the primes.
Mm-hmm.
So who else do you think might have some stress in what places?
From my perspective, government and defense service providers are seeing the first firm certification requirements for upcoming bids.
Okay.
Manufacturers, on the other hand, might be feeling the most pressure right now. Like I said, in most cases, full CMMC compliance is not possible without a significant investment into technological resources, and their local IT support company might not have the expertise to deal with NIST 800-171.
Yeah, it's a lot. Now, I know you say there's 110 clauses, but isn't there like 320 some points that need to be met within those 110 controls?
Yes. Yep. Each control has a number of subset assessment objectives, and you can read that as the shalls if it were ISO, and they're all very detailed. You must have this encryption for any outside connections, and that must be a certain level of government improved encryption.
Right. So even when you hear 110, it seems like a lot, but actually you're getting close to 400 of actual specific details you're going to be checked on. That's a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
I can totally see with that small manufacturers are really struggling, probably the most right now. Now, can you give us a picture of what does CMMC readiness actually look like beyond checklist? You mentioned encryption. You've mentioned, network. How are you really truly ready for CMMC?
Right. Yep. To be truly CMMC ready, you must have all of the requirements and controls documented and be able to demonstrate and provide evidence for each one of those 110 controls and the nearly 400 assessment objectives.
Wow.
So if you don't have at least 100 pages of documentation, the system might be lacking.
Yeah.
Full readiness for certification requires a history of records for your completion of plans, employee training, physical monitoring, configuration control of your devices, how did you log and manage those changes, reviewing your logs. The list goes on and on. But literally for each one of those assessment objectives, you must present an artifact to show that you're meeting it and be able to demonstrate it to the assessor.
So when you say some of these with logs and stuff like that, you have to test them. Some of the stuff has to be tested. You can't just say, "Oh yeah, it's in place," and here's my firewall. Here's that. No, I want to make sure that can't be penetrated. Where's your penetration test?
100%.
Things like that. So you not only have to say it's done, check it off. You got to be able to show a piece of evidence saying, yes, it works.
Yep. You might have a vulnerability plan. Just having the plan isn't good enough. For those, how secure is it? You need a vulnerability scan run. You need some active logging and monitoring tools. And yeah, you actually have to demonstrate that you have done these things.
Okay. And I want to reiterate with that, this is important because I believe you have 48 or is it 72 hours? If there's an occurrence, let's say somebody does get in on your network, might not necessarily even be for CUI. Yep. When you have an incident, that has to be reported within a couple days at max to the government. And they need to be able to see what you've done, what you're doing, see if it's been plugged. So they're serious about this. It's not just like, oh, yeah, it happened. We're taking care of it.
Yep. It's a federally mandated 72-hour reporting period for anything involving CUI.
Wow. I mean, this shows that there is a lot of work that has to be done, and checklists don't cover it. Mm-hmm. They got to show that it's met, required, you've tested it, it's in place. How realistic are these timelines that organizations are setting for themselves, to get this done? And what role do the third-party assessors play? And is the ecosystem ready? Mm-hmm. Here we are, we're in February right now recording this. Only 770 at the beginning of this month out of 300,000 are certified. I'm not a mathematician, but I understand numbers enough to realize that's pretty struggle. That's a big difference.
Yeah, it's a massive undertaking. As far as your timeline, if you are dealing with federal contracts or primes or anything involving defense, know what your customer requirements are right now. Make sure you check your solicitation and contract verbiage. Look up those FAR and CFR clauses so you know where you stand. If your company doesn't have a formal plan to become CMMC compliant, now's the time to start planning. There is a lot of legwork involved with this, even in the simplest of environments. For example, among those 770 CMMC Level 2 certified organizations is one of our clients using our virtual enclave environment.
I believe we call that the Vault.
The Vault, yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. So the Vault is meant to be as small and leak-free as possible. It's a virtual machine, a virtual environment, and there are still all of the same number of controls. It doesn't matter how big or small the system is, there's a massive amount of work involved.
Yeah. And with those, they do meet the requirements of CMMC when it comes to, I know we use AWS Fed, what's that called? AWS GovCloud. That's it. AWS GovCloud and some of the FedRAMP things that are required for all of that. So there are some options that you don't have to lock down your entire network, but there still are a lot of hoops you got to jump through to get that in place and then be assessed for it. And make sure it meets requirements. Because we do things that help you with documentation and all of that stuff as well.
Yep. And for our industry customers out there, think of the lean concept. We want to minimize the number of networks that CY is touching. We want to keep things in segregated, locked rooms. That'll really help you with your efforts and success.
So we talked about sort of the perspective of the client, what we would call the client, the customer, person that's doing it in the industrial base. What about the assessment people, the C3PAOs and all of that kind of stuff? Where are we at with that?
Right. Yep. The CMMC assessing ecosystem is growing rapidly in anticipation of a large number of certification assessments. The governing body, Cyber AB, is making it efficient for organizations and individuals to get the proper training, get certified, jump in as an observer on an assessment, become the next level, and become a full certified assessor.
So it seems there should be enough assessors and people needed to meet the large demand for certifications in the DIB.
That's right. Yeah. I think as time progresses, it's a slow-moving problem that I think the American ingenuity can address.
Okay, great. This is a great primer for 2026 to see where things are and what businesses in the defense industrial base need to do to meet the requirements of CMMC. I really appreciate you being here with Ty. Do you have any closing thoughts for those who aren't certified yet, which is probably most everybody at this point, and what they really should be pushing towards and focusing their efforts on? I know you mentioned right now, read your contracts, know what you're required to do now, and make sure you're meeting that. But in looking forward and maybe wanting to bid on those other new contracts coming out.
My advice to organizations that are going to be subject to this requirement, start finding somebody, maybe local if you have a physical facility, that you can work with to understand your situation and develop a proper information security system.
Okay. So find somebody to help you. Don't try to do it yourself would probably be a good answer. And yes, we are one of those groups of people that can help you. We have multiple consultants that work with CMMC, Ty being one of them. One of the reasons I wanted to have him on the podcast today. He's been doing this. He's done it. He's gotten through, was it 1 or 2 assessments with one of our clients?
We have completed 2 level 2 CMMC assessments to date.
Okay, great. So we have some experience in that, and that means that the customer's been certified. So we've had 2 success stories out of 2. We do have our Enclave solution, which is a Vault, but most of all, we can really just help you guys know what you need to do, wrap your brain around it, and give you some options, even if the Enclave system doesn't meet your requirements. Really appreciate you joining us today, Ty.
Well, thanks so much, X. Looking forward to coming back.
Absolutely. It's really been helpful, and I hope our listeners have gained some much-needed information and guidance on their CMMC journey. Thanks for being here. We want to give a big thank you to everyone who's tuned in today's episode. We hope you found it helpful and walked away with something valuable. And if you'd like to learn more about Core Business Solutions, now proudly part of the LRQA family, and how we can support you with ISO certification, cybersecurity, or customized training, we'd love to hear from you. Just email us at info@thecoresolution.com or visit us online at www.thecoresolution.com. And if you haven't already, make sure to follow the Quality Hub podcast on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. That way you won't miss our next episode dropping next week. Thanks again for listening, and have a great day.